Hello, everyone at home. Thank you so much for joining us and watching our short film program Here and Now. I'm with incredibly talented writer directors, and so I'd hope would like all of you to introduce yourself, if you don't mind. So, Keisha, let's start with you.
Hi, my name is Keisha Chung, and I'm the writer, director, and producer of Gray Area.
Hello, my name is Adrian Wallace, and I'm the writer director for the short film No James Hardy.
Hey, my name is Yvonne Osa, and I'm the writer director for In Other News.
Hey, my name is Paul Torres. I am the writer and director of the Miseducation of the Invisible Yet Furious Five. It's a very long title. I don't know why I did that, but yeah.
Hi, I'm Marina. I'm the writer director of My Pumpkin, My Boo.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for being here and for making your films. We're obviously like huge fans of all of you, which is why you're here. So I guess I kind of wanted to start, and I'll point the questions to each of you. But Marina, I feel like when I watched your film, there were kind of like influences of like French New Wave, and also it's very like it's different. And so I'm so curious about kind of like how your call to action to make the film and like why you made the film in the first place, or like kind of just like the inception of the film.
Yeah, so the film was very much, it was made between me and my friend. It was a very small cast crew, literally two other people and me. And what inspired us to make it was he actually came into our group chat, like we're friends, and he was like, hey, I kind of want to do like a pumpkin like ghost love story, but I don't want to direct it, I don't want to do much, I just want to act in it. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I can do that, because I really enjoy making short films with like romance and things like that. So I was like, okay. And we started figuring it out, and I was like, I think this would look really good if it was silent, if it had just subtitles, because I think it would just add a lot of like that fantasy element to the film. And we kind of just started working with that and the idea of it being just those subtitles and the colors. So yeah, our idea was really much, very much like we need something whimsical but somewhat bittersweet. So that's what we worked with going forward. So yeah.
Wow. One of the things I liked about your film was like your use of, because it was a silent film, like your use of the medium of film as a language was like so strong. And so yeah, like even just the colors and it being October now, it's just funny that because it's like about a pumpkin and a ghost, so it's like incredibly like I want to say topical, but let's say timely. So we're so happy to have you here. Ivan, if you can speak to, I feel like I might know because your film has like such strong sociopolitical undertones of like what's going on inside of it. So if you can kind of speak to why you were called to make the film in that realm.
Yeah. To be fair, I feel like this film came about in the height of last year in the what's it called, the um, like when George Floyd,
Mm-hmm.
got killed and everything. So that's, I feel like just like a lot of people, I realized that I was like really um numbing myself. There was this like what's it called, tweet that went about that was talking about how like it's hard to be a black man or a woman in this society because you're having a good day and then you just found out that oh someone else got killed, and then either you talk about it like for the rest of the day or you just numb yourself. And I didn't realize that I was numbing myself, until I saw that tweet and I was like, oh man, like this is really the world that we be living in. So like I don't know. I feel like this was my way of uh talking about it, that like that's where I put all my emotions and everything that came out. When I heard about the news and when I heard that, like when everything was happening, like I just wrote a script and decided to like film it.
Right. And I think one of the best like one of the things that I liked the most is your commentary on like how like it's no secret that the reason as to why BLM like shot into our faces and was so like it was so present in not only for like BIPOC individuals but for white folks was because of the fact that like the regular things that we numb ourselves with, we didn't have access to them. Like we couldn't go out for a drink and everything. So people are just at home seeing what's on the news. And so and I guess what I like the most is the commentary you make about how it's just like, we just move through life like this because Black people have been getting killed by the police and racialized bodies have been abused systemically. And so it like, that was my favorite part about your film was the fact that it starts with like kind of a news story and then it's like, oh, that person ends up like the protagonist ends up on the news and it's just like we're just going about our day. And to just kind of bring in, because we're talking about a film with strong sociopolitical undertones, Paul Daniel, if you could kind of speak to why you were called to make your film.
Yeah, what's really weird is the fact that when I made the film, I kind of quit filmmaking because I had like such a terrible time. I had a terrible time at film school, so I made my thesis film, and I felt like I accomplished what I wanted to accomplish. This is the story of like the child of immigrants, and he got to college, he got the degree, and I was kind of like, I want to dedicate myself to social work and youth work. And then because everything that was happening around last year, around last spring, some stuff happened concerning my old alma mater. And then me and some friends, we ended up doing student advocacy work with the school. And then I'm also working on a film program that I'm developing at St. Stephen's Community House and Art Reach to make a film program that's kind of like based in decolonial practices, that it's essentially for like young racialized people to teach them how to do guerrilla filmmaking. So like my mind was very much, I'm like, how do you teach like education from a decolonial lens, especially film from a decolonial lens? And through that work, I was like reaching out to people in the industry, not as like, I'm a young filmmaker. I'm like, yo, I'm a youth worker, I have a film degree, I want to do this. But then, I guess like, big force in the sky was looking out for me, and some of one person that I reached out to, they put my name forward because the city of Toronto was doing like kind of a series of films about decolonizing different museums. My name got put through, and then I ended up getting Zion Schoolhouse, and then my topic was decolonizing education, because Zion Schoolhouse was the first school that Egerton Ryerson made that was free public education, which is a part of a legacy of like free education for everybody. Right. But the fact that like, it's Egerton Ryerson who also made residential schools, and Egerton Ryerson. So then on my brain, I'm kind of like, okay, cool. Like let me reflect on the fact that that the public educational system that holds multitudes of racialized children is created by the same man who created a residential school. Right. And also hold the fact that when we're growing up in school, we don't learn about the colonial histories of this country itself, but then also no one teaches like me as an Ecuadorian kid, a kid from Ecuadorian parents, like what happened in Ecuador in the Spanish. No one tells like my friend from the Congo, like what happened in colonization there. Like no one, for my friend from India, like no one tells them like what happened there in the British. So it's kind of like, then also us racialized kids, we don't learn about the intergenerational trauma of the country that we're in. We don't understand our role as settlers, but then we also don't understand the events leading to causing us to be here, and the intersections of our intergenerational trauma. So I was, and then I also wanted to reflect about the fact that like the educational system that we have, at least like when I was coming up, maybe hopefully things are better. I don't think so with the government that we have here in Ontario, if I'm being honest, but like, it was the fact that like, it's assimilation. Our school system acts as a role of assimilation. It's like, we're put in there so we can be one of the good ones, right? And the thing is the fact that like, when I talk to like other, racialized friends, my friends that are racialized, and the fact that like, like when you're a racialized kid and especially when you get to post-secondary, it's a fish out of water experience a lot of the times, especially if you like go to a college or university outside of the city. Like, you're going to get like a lot of kids from like northern or southern Ontario who've like only seen people like you in the movies, or like we had like one Korean kid in high school. So it's kind of like, they don't know how to act around you. And you're like, oh, wow. Like I am from the most multicultural city in the world. And now I'm like, I'm in Ontario, the Ontario that votes conservative like every single election.
Right.
And what called me to it is the fact that this movie was so weird for me because like I made it 3 days after I got an ear surgery, and I feel like it's so weird because the thing is that I wrote the film on codeine because of my ear and I was in pain. So I think that's a lot of it. And there was a lot of rage and aggression because of like how I felt at school and for my friends. And I think what really called to me was kind of like, yo, like our educational system is like such a is such a present tool of white supremacy and assimilation. How do we deal with that? The trauma of it, but then also how do we deal with like the white supremacy that has been inherently put into us because we've come out of these institutions? How do we heal from that, and how do we find our intersections from that? So that's kind of like it's weird because it's kind of like because of the fact that I only had 2 weeks to make the film and I was sick while I was recovering from surgery, it felt like just like I'm just pushing it out. Like I didn't have time to think about it. I wish I had time to think about it and do like and I think do it properly. Yeah. So that's what really called me for. Yeah.
Well, it's everything that it's like I love having these conversations because like everything that you say, I'm like I see it and it jumps off of the screen, and like even calling to question the education system, and like obviously like Canada is one of the most, it's like it's so tough because Canada is one of the most literate nations on the planet, right? However, at what cost? And like as you say, coming out of that system, it's like on one side you're like, well, I'm really happy that I was able to go to school and learn in this country, but on the same line of reasoning, it's like, how did I learn and what did I learn? And also it takes a long time to scrub any kind of like internalized hatred that you might have toward yourself when it comes to how you interact with learning in a country that kind of that's built upon the backs of people that they can deem less than. So thank you so much for making that statement about like why, because it's very, very like very present and like timely, I'd say, especially. So just to swing it to Keisha and then finally Adrian, the lighter films and the lighter films of the program. Keisha, if you can kind of speak to like why you decided to make the film. One of the things I really liked about it was like it's very slice of life and kind of just like this is the life I lead, and not every day has to be like a roller coaster, you know, where we have one film where someone gets like is killed, and then we have your film like no one dies, but like still it like hits home. So if you can speak to kind of like why you made your film and why you
For sure. So Gray Area was a project I've been working on for a really long time. I decided that I wanted to make something that felt very authentic to my experience growing up in Toronto as a young Black woman, being in the modeling industry, and also just finding something that reflected the experiences of myself and people around me. I feel like the movie was a little piece of me that I put out. It's my first film, so I really wanted to make it I wanted it to feel authentic, and I wanted to sound like Toronto, look like Toronto, feel like Toronto. So I was very intentional about the brands that we put in the film, even the alcohol that's seen in it, and everything was just very intentional for me to make it sound and feel like my experiences and the experiences of people around me as well. But it was also just adding to the narrative. Like right now, we have so many amazing, talented people putting work out, and it's a reflection of all the talent that exists in the city. And I feel like there's not enough of it, and there's not enough exposure that we get. So I wanted to contribute my story and the experiences of people again around me and put it into a film. So
I love that. And then Adrian, because it's on the topic of Toronto, my Toronto man. I just learned like that's the thing that Toronto man says. A lie? Can you speak to your film and like, because I would say I don't of this program right here. I would say when I say weird, I don't mean that, because there's definitely like Marina's film, Paul's film, and your film. There's definitely dissent from reality, even though it's grounded in reality. Not dissent, sorry. Like it's like heightened. Like it's definitely more imaginative, and kind of just stemming off of what Keisha was talking about, like Toronto, like Lauren Dufferin. Right outside Dufferin Station. So if you can kind of talk to like why you made, because it's just so, I just found the idea just so bizarre. So if you can kind of just speak to like how the idea came to you to like make this film.
Yeah, and it's okay, Aisha. You can say it with your chest. If you think it's weird, say it's weird, you know.
No, weird. It's not that it's
But
weird. It was just like I was like, cool. I loved it because it reminded me of Spike Lee. Like,
I'm so it's funny you said that. So just to kind of comment on the weird thing, like I think weird is the new sexy. You know, I like being different. And you know, I think I'm weird. You know, but you know, it's one of those words that are kind of subjective. You know, like what's weird to you might not be weird to someone else. What's good to you might not. You know, so I actually appreciate that honest commentary about it being weird. Because to me, it just means unique. But essentially, um, I'll start by saying this film was actually extremely cathartic for me. I was coming fresh off an injury to my Achilles. So that's the first note. So I literally shot this whole film on an Achilles rupture, and I was like 2 months fresh of the industry. The doctor said I shouldn't be on it, and I said, "F it, I'm gonna do it." That was also motivated by the fact that this was also shot in the pandemic. Like this was the first summer pandemic that we had, and you know, I was just sitting around and you know, just losing motivation, and I'm in like this creative kind of just buying, and I feel like I just needed to get something. I had all these obstacles that I was dealing with, and this film was that kind of opportunity to just kind of get back on the horse. Like I didn't care if I had to go on crutches, um, or fight the police to shoot a film. You know, like you said, on the graffiti wall of Bloor and Dufferin. Like I was about it. Like I was ready to just like deal with it because I was just so sick of, you know, just staying home and just moping. Like, oh, I'm injured. Oh, a pandemic. Can't do. You know what I mean? So it was a really cathartic experience. I'll just start with that. But yeah, the film itself, honestly, it just I just wanted to do something fun. You know, I was coming off a very dramatic documentary called Black Sun, which dealt with gun violence, and I just needed to kind of jump back in my comedy roots. So this film was the perfect opportunity to do it. And I grew up with one of the leads, the guy who plays the James Harden imposter. So essentially, for those who don't know, James Harden tells the story of two friends who, you know, kind of bored, motiveless, have no agenda. They stumble upon a superstar James Harden, NBA superstar James Harden imposter, and then suddenly put him to the test to kind of validate his authenticity after he claims to be the one and only. So you know, very absurd, you know, comedy concept, like you said. And I had a friend who I've been friends with for 20 years, maybe longer. And you know, he grew into his manly features. He had the full out beard. And I remember just one day I pulled him aside. I'm like, man, I know you're not an actor, but I'm gonna use you for something, you know. And you know, just with the hype of like NBA season and you know, just being bored and motivated to do something. I'm like, I love to pull resources from real life. I like my real life inspires me. My friends are characters,
right.
you know, and then just things that happen are just natural story ideas. So I'm like, that's the best place to pull ideas from. So I always start there. And I told him, and this was the year 2020 came. I'm like, man, like his beard is like fully mature at this point. James Harden was known for his beard, so it just kind of made sense. And you know, I kind of just put together this film about two friends just coming across a guy who pretends he's a celebrity, and I didn't realize the social commentary attached to it before. Like for me, I just wanted to do a fun film, but when you think about it, I feel like we're always being tested for our authenticity, right? On social media, deciding what we want to show, what we don't want to show, people judging us, people don't even know us and think they know us. We're still trying to figure out ourselves. So there was a lot of those things. And of course, imposter syndrome, I feel like, we constantly question if we're good enough, if we should even be in the industry doing the things that we're doing. So it's funny how all those things came after the fact or derived after the fact that I just wanted to do a fun film. There was some animation in there. Like it was a very collaborative project. My editor was great. He kind of came up with the idea to kind of just throw some animation just to kind of see how it flew. So yeah, man, it was a very, like I said, a very cathartic experience for me. And yeah, it was just film was motivated by people in my life, and I was able to take a guy who kind of resembled a real life superstar and kind of make a movie out of it. So yeah.
Well, it's funny. It's just funny. And like, we were so happy to have it because like comedy, it was a dark year last year. And I feel like people just want to laugh, but a lot of filmmakers who just like also talk to kind of about like what went on last year. And like, it's not, one is not better than the other, but it's always nice to have a varied program. And so I guess I kind of wanted to open like into like a little space of discussion before my last question, which is kind of like barriers to entry. So you guys are in the Here and Now program, which is kind of like what's current, what's hot, what's contemporary, what's new is kind of like, and when I say what's hot, I kind of mean like what's on the tip of our tongues, what are pressing issues, like what's going on right now. And so I kind of, right now, the topic is, it's very topically, we're also kind of thinking about like how, for as an industry, how we can be more inclusive to marginalized filmmakers. And so I'm curious about all of you and like the barriers that you find when you're trying to make your film, not even specifically logistically, but just in general as a filmmaker in the city or not in the city. I feel like all of you might be Toronto based though, right? Yeah. So Toronto. So for all my Toronto if you can speak to kind of like your barriers to entry and like how you're trying to find ways to overcome them, and feel free to like just converse, because I'm just curious about hearing from filmmakers and like what they're bumping up against.
I think the biggest issue I think is we can open as many doors as we want as an industry, but we don't do enough to develop kids from like 0 to 18 or 0 to 25. You know, like a kid from a nice neighborhood, because of the way our tax system works, they go to a nice neighborhood, that tax money goes to their school, and they have a film program. A kid from Driftwood has to wait till like summer to possibly have a film program for 3 months that's like once every 2 weeks. They're not going to learn anything. And the thing is, the chances that that film program is going to come back is like really slim. So it's the fact that like we can open as many doors as we want, but the thing is the fact that like we don't. I feel like we need to start developing storytellers here in the city. And I think one of the biggest issues that we find here in the city is the fact that like Canada, we're known for documentary, and here in Toronto, what drives our industry is music. Right. So the thing is the fact that like we need to teach like young people how to write, as directors, how to have a storytelling lens as much as. Because I feel like here in Toronto, visually, atmospherically, we're great. Storytelling, we still need that work. But the issue is that the way that we learn storytelling is the fact that I feel like as a writer, you need to be able to have a mentor who's able to like help you like deal with like, hey, I'm dealing with some intense racial trauma in this script, and I need someone to help me get that out of me. Sorry, not get out, but unpack that. And then learn from that and be able to have like more nuanced things and stuff like that. And I also think one of the biggest issues is the fact that still in this city, like we still treat like we use racialized as an umbrella term. We act like just because it's one racialized experience, it represents everybody, right? So like the journey of like a kid going to college or something like that, that's different from like you know, like blank kid from like a nice family or like blank kid from like a working class family. So I think it's just kind of like those are kind of like the barriers that like I think like at a young age, at like a really young age, you need to start like putting people towards forward. And the fact that like look at CBC and how they like did such a terrible job of using Kim's Convenience. Kim's Convenience should have been like a factory for young racialized writers. They should have gone junior writers. From season 1, and they didn't. And that was such a gigantic platform. Like Kim's Convenience could have been an explosion for this city for storytellers and writers, and CBC, again, that's a prime example that you can talk all this talk about how you want to be there for racialized people. We had an amazing opportunity to put on young racialized voices from Kim's Convenience and then give them spinoffs or whatever, because like you have Run the Burbs and then Power has their spinoffs. Like
100%. And so 100% I get what you're saying.
Sorry, I'm going to tangent talking to
No, it's fine. But like I think so it sounds like what you're saying is like that's one of the main 6 barriers to entry, like whereas like people that are marginalized filmmakers might not have access to the means in order to start filmmaking from an early age. A lot of times if your parents are like from a different country, they might not actually see working in the arts as a viable career for you, and they might not help to incubate it. I'm just curious to hear from anyone else if you guys have any like barriers that you have found bumping up against, even if it's like access to gear. I'm just so curious.
I just want to say something on the comment that you just made, particularly about CBC. I totally agree with that, but I also think that when you look at shows like Next Stop, which is a show by primarily Black people and the whole crew was like BIPOC, I think there are spaces that are being made for those types of stories to be told. Right. And then you also have like Sort of, which is a new comedy that's coming out through CBC as well. And I think that for me, one of the issues I have is that a lot of times because we're, you know, people of color, or for me, I'll speak to my experience, I'm a Black woman, we're expected to talk about race somehow. And there's this expectation that the stories that are going to be told that will be prioritized are ones that focus on that. for me, I'm more interested in talking, not that it's not important, you know, like I come from a women's studies background. So for me, race is always tied into things I do. Feminism is always tied into things I do. But I would love to see more stories being told, you know, or given more opportunities to tell stories that are not just about our experiences and our trauma in that capacity. And even for me with gray area, that's why, like you said earlier, like it's something that's just about like a slice of life. It's about a relationship. You know, everybody can relate to that. And it just, for me, it just so happens that Dre's character is Black. Her race isn't what's tying it into making the story something that I think people will attach themselves to. You know what I mean? And I think, again, it's not to say that we shouldn't be telling these stories, but for me, what I found is when I was pitching this idea to people, they're like, well, who's going to want to watch this? Like, what's the hook here? You know what I mean? But I feel like if it was a white person, that question wouldn't have been asked. You know what I mean?
And it's true. And like, this is the thing where I feel like there are kind of, and I don't want to say opposing, but like different opinions. Because the thing is, I genuinely feel like in the middle when it comes to things like the CBC, because it's like Next Stop is great. Like we programmed Next Stop last year, and that was when they had just like found word that they were getting greenlit for a second season. And it's like, yes, great. But like even those kinds of web series are made on such a minuscule budget. So then like kind of speak to Paul Daniels, his opinion as well, because I see both sides. To speak to Paul Daniel,
I think like sorry.
Yeah, no, but like to speak to what you were saying, like with Kim's Convenience, it's like you can put people in a writer's room, because like then if you're in a writer's room, that like kind of gives you way to like opportunities that are like bigger budget television series, like I don't know.
And an opportunity to be unionized and to have health benefits.
But like but there's two different sides to it, because like like the CBC is trying, but it's also like in what realm? Because it's like a digital series is also marketed different from like a series on Netflix. But there's not to discredit either of you, because you both make very good points. I have a couple more minutes, so I just wanted to kind of hear from maybe Adrian, Ivan, Marina as to what your thoughts are, and then I have like a summary question, and then we're gonna end because I've got someone in my chat being like, "Okay, fine, you get 5 minutes."
So I want to speak because I'm actually in school right now for film. Like I'm in my third year.
Cool.
I'm at Ryerson, soon to be renamed, thankfully.
I didn't know
that. yeah, thankfully. So as someone who's currently like going through schooling, I'm young. I'm turning 20 this month. I got into my program. Like I'm not from Toronto. Like I'm actually from Oakville. So that was pretty predominantly white neighborhood. I had a film program, but it was not really that big. It was really small. It was only 2 years, and it was like, you know, we worked with DSLRs. It wasn't like major or anything. We didn't have lighting or anything. It was just like, you know, small things. So going into uni, I was like, okay, I'm going to meet a lot of like other people of color who are also in film. I'm really excited. And I get onto my program, and majority of my program is white. Not to like, it's literally like, I don't care. Like, it's not like a thing for me, but I was also very much excited to meet other people of color who are also interested in film, and to find that there were maybe, I can count on my hand how many people in a 100+ like program. I was a little discouraged, but I was like, it's okay. But that is like my current experience with it. Also with the pandemic, it was really hard because I really wanted to work with equipment for the last few years, but I only had my first year in person, if anything. So it was really hard to work with equipment and like actually get accustomed to like any of the cameras that I wanted to use, because I'm really interested in cinematography and everything like that. So currently right now I'm actually on a set, which is I'm really thankful for, that is mainly like people of color. Like this whole project is people of color. It's a student film, TV pilot for their practicum 4th year. So I'm helping with them. I'm their director of photography. And I'm just really thankful that I found like more people that I can work with that are also like-minded. So yeah, that's just my experience right now. I also was looking for, I looked to Kim's Convenience also as one of my inspirations. And my essays to get into this program were all about representation in the media. And I definitely agree with Keisha. Like I also really want to be able to focus on stories that are not necessarily on race. Like I think it's also very important, but I'm personally someone who who connected much with my heritage and my background. So it's hard for me to be able to portray, like I'm Filipino, like I could not accurately portray Filipino stories on the screen, but I can cast people of color in my films and make films about people regardless of their race, because I want to be able to see what I couldn't see when I was younger on screen, just people doing normal things.
But and also just to speak to, and like I also think the interesting thing here is like to speak to Paul again, it's kind of like like Kim's Convenience is a missed opportunity, but every television series on Canadian like on TV should be an opportunity to bring more racialized people in. Even if like forgetting it, because like Kim's Convenience is about a Korean family, as we know, but it's like, why not just bring more creatives on? Like that was an example of how there was a missed opportunity. But I think on Moss, the missed opportunity is that we can bring all kinds of creators through. So it sounds like what I'm hearing is like barriers to entry are like 0 to 18, like so like kind of like what your upbringing is like, and then also like gatekeeping. When it sounds like if you like walk into a program and you're kind of disappointed about like the lack of diversity. Yeah, Ivan, Adrian, do you have any thoughts about like barriers to entry and like what you bump up against as filmmakers and how you overcome them? Let's give it light.
Yeah, I feel like to echo like what everyone else is saying, I feel like the biggest problem with BIPOC people is just like a lot of us just don't know. Like we don't know where to go to like get funding. We don't know where to go to learn. We really don't know like how to get into the industry, you know, because you're saying like it's gonna gatekeep and everything like that. I also want to touch on what Keisha said when she's like, I feel like we should see more stories about just like people being people. Like I agree with that 100%. I feel like even me as a filmmaker, like who I was a year ago and now like are changing. You know, there was a quote that I read that was being said how like I feel like lately they're kind of just like reselling or repackaging our trauma to us, and like I'm scared to say like I added to that, and I don't really like want to do that anymore. So it's like from now on, like I want to just make stories about like just humans being humans. They happen to be black because you know what I mean, but at the same time, it's just like it's a human story, you know. So like I feel like that's where I'm going with my filmmaking, but at the same time, I feel like that's what I want to see more of too. You know, not just like stories about like our trauma, if that makes sense.
No, I love that. And like that's so succinct. It's like that's perfect. It's like our trauma is repackaged to us, which speaks to Keisha. And it's like both of them are important. There's like I think they're equally important. And so yeah, thank you for like that's so like, you hit the nail on the head. And I love that. But even like again, each side is important though. So Adrian, if you can kind of speak to that. And then the last question, last because Zareen Bushra is mad at me because I'm running late. If you can think of one word that you wanted to leave your audience with at the end of watching your film, what word would that be? So we're going to hear from Adrian, and then we're going to get that one word for you because I actually can't get a full sentence from you because I'm over time. So again, if you could think of one word that you wanted to leave your audience with after they watch your film, what word is that? Adrian, what are your thoughts about barriers to entry? And then we'll go to Marina.
Yeah, thanks, Keisha. I guess the problem of going last is that all the good answers get taken up, but I'll take one for the team. Now, I do resonate with everything everyone said. I could piggyback off like a highlight from everyone's conversation. I think to sum it up, I definitely think, especially just going through the experience of doing like my first calling card project, which was a web series that was shot in the community that I grew up called Malton. It's kind of like on the outskirts of Mississauga. I think it was Marina that mentioned a point that said, or maybe Paul, about when you're born in these kind of low income communities, we don't get access to these things that are going to kind of really support potential aspirations that we have in career, projections that we want to have for ourselves. So I feel like in communities like I grew up in, their version, like our next generation's version of immediate film school, is the projects that we go back with to our communities and shoot. So, my project Courtside was a perfect example. I wanted to involve as many kids as possible, in the making of it, whether they were acting, whether they're just on set, kind of, spying on production, just kind of seeing how it's made. It's really sad that, in communities like I grew up with, the only time cameras come around when it's attached to a news team. Because somebody got shot, somebody got stabbed, the robbery got stolen, or there's a robbery at a convenience store. So I really am adamant about reinventing, how we, especially me and Black people, are looked at, are represented, and I kind of want to, reinvent the Black experience, and like Ivan said, we have so many more stories to tell. You know what I mean? We're more than what we've been portrayed as for decades, years. On top of that, so funding is a big thing too. Like I can't tell you I probably self-funded all of my projects today, which is crazy because sometimes it's just, oh, where do I get this funding from, or where do I
Right.
get this grant writer from, or where do I, so it's just like it's more of a convenient tool. But I feel like we've done it enough where people should trust us with some money now. It's kind of like being, I guess more knowledgeable or having more, mentors, like kind of guide us on how we could be successful in getting funding and being trusted to tell more stories about just, not our trauma, not repackaging our trauma, and there's so much more to our lives. You know what I mean? I feel, yes, like Keisha said, it's in our DNA, the racial undertones and the stuff that we have to go through on a daily basis, and all that stuff. It's in our DNA. It'll probably come out subconsciously in some film, some shape, form or way. But I feel like there's so much more potential in the stories that we can tell, and we need the gatekeepers to trust us more, not just with money, but to trust us that there's an audience for us to kind of land our stories. So
I love that. Trust. Thank you, Adrian. All right, very quickly, because I'm probably going to get skewered after this by the organizer. One word that you'd like an audience to be left with after watching your film. Marina, thoughts?
Content.
I love that. Keisha?
Transition.
Ooh, okay. Paul?
Happy.
Yes. Yeah. That really, yeah, I love that. Sorry. Ivan?
I don't have a word, but I don't breakthrough. I'll say.
Breakthrough. That's great.
Yeah.
And Adrian, last but not least?
I think I'm gonna go with the word brave.
Okay. I feel it. I feel it. Well, thank you all so much for being here and for indulging me in my questions and for the light debate. I loved it. I felt like I was on CNN, being like listening to the boxes of each person being like, but this. So thank you. You've made my CNN dream come true. So to those at home, thank you so much for watching this talk back with us. And these brilliant filmmakers have their films. Please watch them again. Like, share, tweet, hire them. Thank you again for watching, and ta-ta.